Hello, my name is B.D. Wood, known as Brian Woodson. I just want to say thank you for tuning to my YouTube channel. I'm here to encourage, to inspire, to motivate, and to have real talk and real conversation. For my regular subscribers, thank you so much for just your dedication and for watching each and every week when you're able. For those of you who have found me on YouTube, thank you so much. And for those of you who found me on Facebook, thank you so much. I'm humbled, I'm honored, and I don't take this lightly, and I don't take this for granted. Today, I want to talk about a subject that I believe we all can relate to in some kind of way, and it's simply a ram in the bush. A ram in the bush. Now, I'm pretty sure some of y'all are probably wondering, what is he talking about? Well, if you remember the story of Abraham back in Genesis chapter 22, verses 8 through 13, God tells Abraham to take his son Isaac to the land of Moriah and to offer him as a burnt offering. Now, to give you some background of this story, Abraham was promised a son, and Abraham and his wife Sarah was up in age. And at the time, they didn't think that it was possible for them, just paraphrasing, to have a child being so old. But God had plans. And so basically what happened was that Sarah, because her patience was getting thin, and the fact that she was older, asked Abraham to sleep with her handmaid. And so Abraham did, and had a child named Ishmael. And so that played along, but then the promise came that Abraham ended up still having, Sarah still ended up having the promised son, which is Isaac. Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90. So this was a promised son. It happened. So now think about it now. You got a child that God has promised you, and then God is saying, okay, I want you to go and sacrifice this child. So most of us be like, you promised me something, now you're going to take it away, God? How many of you experience that in your life today? God's promised you something and then it gets taken away. Or has it ever happened? Something to think about. So anyway, God took his son Isaac up to this land, the land that he showed him to go. And it says in verse, around verse, like I said, it's Genesis 22, 8 through 13. The whole chapter 22 talks about it, but then it gets to verse 8 and 13 when the actions will take place. So as they got to this land, Isaac, just paraphrasing, was like, Dad, where's the offering? Because Isaac knew how this was going to go. He knew that when they had an offering, something was going to be sacrificed. He just didn't know at the time it was going to be him. And so Abraham said God would provide it. So Abraham ended up putting Isaac on the altar, right? And so in verse 13 it says, and Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of the son. So basically, in other words, Abraham put Isaac on the altar, and then the angel of the Lord was like, whoa, Abraham, whoa, stop. Because Abraham's getting ready to slay. Abraham getting ready to do what God told him to do. The angel said, whoa, now, stop. You know what I'm saying? God sees your obedience. God sees what you're doing. Put him down, Abraham. I got a ram in the bush for you. Go on and burn that. So Abraham did what he said. God, Abraham took his son Isaac off the altar, got the ram, and that was the offering, and that was a sacrifice to God. So what is this saying? this is basically saying that, and again, all that was paraphrased, so I hope that you got an understanding of that. This was a reminder that we are to be in obedience and faith, and that God will keep his promises and covenant he has made. So as long as we're being obedient, as long as we're being faithful, God's going to keep his covenant and promise he has made. God gave Abraham and Sarah the promised son. Abraham, even though he got the promise, was ready to sacrifice the promise on the altar. God recognized his obedience, recognized his faith, yielded, stopped the situation, put the ram in the bush there as the offering, and Abraham was still able to keep the promised son because of his faith and because of his obedience. The ram represents sacrifice, protection, and guidance. The spiritual meaning of the ram in the Bible is simply wisdom and discernment. So think about that. The ram represents sacrifice, protection, and guidance. That makes sense to me. So when you think about that, I said all that story to simply say there's always a ram in the bush. So when you look at your life, think about all the rams that God has blessed you in the bush. And let me give you an example. I was at my church, and I won't say everything about it, but I was at my church and I was praying about a situation that I was experiencing at my church. I am devoted and dedicated at my church, whether it's preaching, singing, serving, being there, teaching, whatever the case may be. And I was having a discussion with my parents, and I was like, I want to go, see you guys more. I want to visit you guys more, and just do different things. I'm single. I have nothing tying me down. I just want to move around a little bit more to where I can, because my parents getting old in age, and just kind of, just want to visit every once in a while. But I said because I'm dedicated to the church and what's going on, and they said, well, just go. They'll be all right. They'll survive without you, and that's true. They survived without me before, and they survived without me after, right? So what happened was that I was praying about it. I left it alone. I continue to go serve, do what I do weekly. I see other people, they left and they go visit their family or be out of town. And here I am every week. They're faithful. I'm like, well, God, when is it going to be me? And so all of a sudden, God opened the door and a ram came in the bush. And the particular thing I was doing that was causing me to have to, or for me to feel like I had to be there every week, God opened the door, and there was a ram in the bush that came back home. Not saying he left the home, but he had came back home, meaning he came back to the church, more consistently. And that kind of freed me up from the obligation I was doing on a daily basis to not as frequently. So that ram came, and it blessed me to where I was able to move around. So because of that, I'm now able to move around a little bit more, and I'm able to see my parents more. Something I was praying for. I was being faithful, like I said earlier about Abraham. I was being faithful. I was being obedient because God had told me to move. Being faithful, committed. And then God blessed me with the ram in the bush, which is, like I said, sacrifice, protection, and guidance. Bless me with a ram in the bush to where I could finally go and visit my parents. And it's been the best year of my life as far as going to see my parents more and spending time with them. And then he later blessed me with another ram in the bush that came back. And it really it's allowed me to move around a little more because God knew not only what the church needed, but God also knew what I needed. And so that's what I was referring to about a ram in the bush. And so I was blessed with a ram in the bush. What about you? What is your ram in the bush? I gave a biblical example. I gave a personal example. What about you? Have you ever experienced a ram in the bush? You have been praying for something, and you've been praying and praying and praying, and you just kind of just sat still, and then all of a sudden the floodgates just opened up. And out of nowhere, something you was not expecting was right there. But you know why it's right there? Because you was obedient and you was faithful to what you was doing or whatever was going on, and you didn't move outside of God's will. And then when God said move, or when you was at your breaking point, it seemed, God opened a door. And when that door opened, it freed you up to move. That's your ram in the bush. And that could be a job. You could be at a job right now. And you're asking God, I want a new job. But you know what? God didn't say quit your job where you was at. You're desiring a new job, right? I'm talking about this from an earthly perspective now, from a day-to-day perspective right now. You're praying for a new job. But you're saying, God, I will be faithful. I will be obedient. And I will commit to what I'm doing right now until you say move. And right when you was at your breaking point, a door opened. Whether it was a boss that left, whether it was a new job that came aboard, at your current job, a new position that came on board, or whether you changed the whole job, a door opened just for you. That was your ram in the bush. Meaning that you didn't move until God said move. Now, a lot of us, what we do, we move, but God did not say for us to move. We're not obedient and we're not faithful to what God has called us to do. We'll move because we're tired of the wait. We're tired of being patient. But when you do that, guess what? You don't receive your ram in the bush that's meant from you from a spiritual perspective and from a godly perspective. You may receive a ram, but it may not be the ram that God has for you, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind. Be obedient and stay faithful. And then when God says move, or then when God opens the door, that's your ram in the bush. Whether it's your job, whether it's your finances, whether it's you trying to get into a relationship, whether you're trying to decide what church you want to go to, whether it's, something going on at your house, whether it's something you're praying for in your marriage, whether it's you trying to buy a new car, whether it's something with your health. I don't know what the situation is, but God does. There is always a ram in the bush. But in order for us to get that ram in the bush, we have to be obedient and we have to be faithful. And when we're obedient and faithful, God will provide to you the promise that he provided. That promise is the ram. You know why it's a promise? Well, we pray, God, I desire this, I need this. Is it your will and not my agenda? Because if it's God's will, then it's promised. And it's going to be done. And it's a ram in the bush. Think about it. Think about it. I pray this has motivated you, inspired you, encouraged you in some kind of way. A ram in the bush. Abraham was getting ready to sacrifice his son Isaac. Get ready to strike him. The angel says, whoa, Abraham, stop. God, we see your obedience, we see your faith. Let him go and get that ram. And you sacrifice that ram. We see your faithfulness. We see your obedience. We promised you that son, and we're going to continue to have that son because it was a promised son that we had promised you a long time ago. And it's right there. I encourage you. I motivate you, and I hope I inspired you in some kind of way. Think about it. A ram in the bush. May God bless you. May God keep you. Until next time, B.D. Wood, I'm out. Thank you so much.